The Oregon legislature goes back into special session on Wednesday. The Senate will consider the $4.3 billion transportation bill that already passed the House. Representative Cyrus Javadi of Tillamook voted yes on that bill, at the time the only Republican to do so. And then shortly after that vote, he made an even bolder move. He changed his party affiliation to Democrat, and the fallout has been immediate. Representative Javadi represents House District 32, the North Coast from Astoria to Neskowin, and he also owns a dental practice in Tillamook. Representative Cyrus Javadi, welcome to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Well, thanks for having me here.
Well, in your announcement on social media, you said, quote, "What's changed isn't me, it's the party I once called home." What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is that over the course of this last session, every important priority for the Oregon North Coast that I brought forward in the legislature was opposed by the Republican Party. And these were things that normally would be right in their wheelhouse, whether it was protecting rural health care, ensuring that students had access to books that they wanted to read that reflected who they are, protecting freedom of speech, and whereas the Democrats, on the other hand, were willing to work with me to champion those ideas. And then what we see broader happening nationally just doesn't reflect the Republican Party that I initially joined back in 2012.
How long had you been considering switching parties?
For a couple of months, since the end of session.
And what was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak?
You know, the biggest straw was, like I said, there were several policies that were very important to the North Coast. And it wasn't just that the Republicans were opposed to the idea because it was bad for their district. They were adamantly opposed to it and fighting against it, in my opinion, to protect special interests. And so I saw that instead of wanting to solve problems that were important for the people that I represent, they wanted to make sure they were synced up with a broader national agenda or re-election agenda for the Republicans. And for me, that was a problem. And so I needed to decide whether I was going to continue with that party or whether I needed to do something differently.
Now, Republicans are not happy about this.
Sure.
Basically, in the House, you've extended the Democrat majority there.
Mm-hmm.
So what's been the feedback from the Republican Party, and how are the Democrats welcoming you into their party?
Okay, good question. The immediate response from the Republican Party was that they're very upset, they feel betrayed, and that they reached out through all sorts of nasty emails. There was a damage done to my office almost immediately, and then on the other hand, the Democrats have welcomed me with open arms. I've received messages from across the district, across the state, the country, and the world as people have, for whatever reason, decided to pay attention to a little legislator from the Oregon North Coast switching parties. And no matter where I go, people are saying, thank you for your courage, thank you for standing out. And for me, that's not why I did it, right? I did it because the policy was right and because I was frustrated with the direction of the party. And so it's definitely been a mixed bag of reactions from both sides of the aisle.
You're running for a third term next year, and there's already a recall petition against you. And the chief petitioner says you no longer represent your constituents who voted for you as a Republican. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, I think two things. One, as an elected official, we sometimes run as a Democrat or a Republican. But once we're elected, we swear an oath to the Constitution. We promise to represent everybody in our community. And especially in my district, it is actually slightly more Democratic than Republican. And of that other group, the independents or the non-affiliated, are even larger than both of those combined. So when I approach my job, I think of it as my responsibility to represent every single person, regardless of what party they might represent. As far as I'm not representing the party anymore, I think that she's probably not wrong. I mean, honestly, where the party is now is not where the party was even 10, 15 years ago. And my hope was that the party would revert back to where it had been in the past. I just don't see that happening. And so rather than wait for an election to put the question to the voters, this individual felt like a recall was a better approach. And so, yeah, we've had to have that going on in the background as well.
Your vote on House Bill 3991, the transportation bill, why did you vote for that, despite the tax and fee increases that the Republicans oppose?
Sure, good question. You know, I spent a lot of time diving into this, hundreds of hours of research, asking the fundamental question, do we need to raise a tax? Because nobody wants to raise taxes. It's politically unpopular. And also I feel like we have a duty and responsibility to use public funds on projects and purposes that we think are worth it. In my mind, as I looked at this problem, Oregon has a transportation network crisis, right? Over the last 5 years especially, costs have just skyrocketed. Asphalt, steel, concrete, and labor. Just like everything else in the private sector, in my own private practice, labor has gone up 60 to 100%. At the same time, for Oregon, the revenue model has not been keeping up, right? The way we fund highways in the state of Oregon, like almost every other state, is by charging tax on gasoline when we purchase it. And because people are buying less gasoline, because cars have gotten more fuel efficient, the amount of revenue coming in is less. Yet cars are still driving the same number of miles, still doing the same amount of wear and tear. Paint still doesn't last as long as it used to, as it should. And so we had a fundamental revenue issue, cost issue that every business would face. And as I looked at it, the only real way to fix this for the next 2 to 4 years was to raise the gas tax 6 cents.
You talked about your practice. You're a dentist, and you've been public with your concerns about the federal administration potentially cutting Medicaid benefits.
Yeah.
How does that issue in particular affect your constituents on the coast?
Oh my gosh. Rural health care across the nation, and even here in Oregon, is in a precarious position. Again, like we just talked about with ODOT and even with a private business, their costs have gone up quite a bit over the course of the last 10 years, but especially over the last 5 years post-COVID. Whereas the revenue side of their model, right, fees for doing services, has not kept up. In fact, it's only gone up 1 to 3% per year, while labor and other supplies have gone up again 60, 70, or 100%. So you've got these margins that have been getting squeezed tighter and tighter with no relief. And where we are now is with H.R. 1, the big beautiful bill, and the state had to make some decisions about what we would do to make sure we kept hospitals and healthcare systems afloat in rural communities, and that meant expanding the Medicaid provider tax, making sure that 340B funding, which was funneling money from pharma into hospitals, stayed in place, because just knocking one of those legs out from under the stool will cause severe financial distress for some of our rural hospitals, and we're seeing that already across the state. Oregon Health Authority, just in the last couple of weeks, released a report that the hospitals in Oregon have lost $300 million in the first quarter of 2025. And you just can't hemorrhage like that and stay afloat. And that means potentially really losing healthcare access to communities who desperately need it.
We've got less than a minute to go here, but now that you switch parties from Republican to Democrat,
Yeah.
won't you face the same kind of political pressures from the Democrat side to adhere to what they want to vote for in the legislature?
I suspect so. I think in politics, where it is now, is that there is a lot of pressure to toe the party line. But I think there's also a real appetite for policymakers to come, do the homework, and make the tough choices. My colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle, we share the same values. We believe in putting party before politics, putting people before politics, principle before party, and solving problems and getting things done. They respect where I'm at. They realize I'm coming from a different party. I'm going to have slightly different goals and way of looking at things, and they've assured me that they value that and that we'll be able to work together, and that I won't always be voting yes on every single policy that the Democrats advance, but also will be voting yes quite a bit.
Representative Cyrus Javadi, thank you very much for being here on Eye on Northwest Politics.
Well, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.